Hi, I'm Eric Gadby, and I have been an enthusiast for all things nautical and aerospace since the age of 10. I served for 22 years in the U.S. Submarine Force and have been supporting it for the last 15 years since retiring. Join me as I pursue my passion for first-person context for ships, aircraft, and historic sites that have shaped our world, as well as some that are off the beaten path. Welcome to Roy, Utah, just north of Salt Lake City and home to Hill Air Force Base and the Hill Aerospace Museum. This is part 2 of a personally guided tour of the museum with Lieutenant Colonel Mark Hasara, U.S. Air Force retired, call sign Sluggo. Mark is a former KC-135 pilot, the author of the best-selling book Tanker Pilot, Lessons from the Cockpit, public speaker, host of the Lessons from the Cockpit show on YouTube, and is a small business owner of Wall Pilot Custom Aviation Graphics. In addition to all of these, Mark is a great friend and mentor.
All right, so let's talk about this famous airplane.
Fuselage was derivative of the F-104?
Yeah, it was. I think it was in June of 1962 that they first thought, what's going on in Cuba? All right. I think his name was McCone, was the CIA guy. And he's like, something's going on in Cuba because SA-2 missile sites are going up all over. So they started flying RB-47 missions, the B-47 bomber configured as a reconnaissance airplane down there, and started finding out, well, why are all these SA-2 sites going up? Why are all these Fansong radars going up around the island? And they couldn't figure it out, but they knew that something was happening. And then finally, October 14th of 1962 is when President Kennedy authorized the first overflights of Cuba with a U-2. And that pilot, his name was Major Heiser. He took off from Edwards Air Force Base in a brand new F model because the F model had a new engine in it. He goes across southern Arizona, New Mexico, out in the Gulf of Mexico, and turns south. Goes down to the Yucatan Peninsula and then turns left for Cuba. The first place they wanted to look at was a place called San Cristobal. He's only over the island of Cuba for 7 minutes. But during that 7 minutes, he has now photographic proof that medium range, and a day later, they find out intercontinental ballistic missiles in Cuba, which starts the Cuban Missile Crisis. So Heiser lands, and of course they take, excuse me, all the photographic stuff out, and they see all this stuff. And now they're like flying 6 missions a day, and they're looking at several spots. And these missions were called brass knob missions. The U-2 mission's nickname was Brass Knob. Well, they want to get better pictures of all of these sites, and they want to do it low level, and the only thing they could do was the F-8 Crusaders. And those missions were called Blue Moon missions. And if you want to read a really, really good book, go find the book that's called Blue Moon over Cuba by the commander who was the advisor to the movie that Kevin Costner's in, you know, about the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's a fantastic book. And he's the guy that flies the first low-level missions, the very first low-level mission that's depicted in the movie over Cuba, and finds, you know, the warhead bunkers, the missile launchers. He's getting fired at like crazy. LeMay wants to just nuke the place. And he talks about all those missions that he flies, okay? Now, interesting thing, they obviously want to find all the cargo ships, and they do. But there's one they can't find called the Grozny. They don't know where it's at. They don't know what it's doing. And they're going, where is this thing? Where is this thing? And they actually have a KC-97 that's full of gas. Go, will you go search in this sector for this thing and everything? And there was a code name for that mission too. Something Banner, like Blue Banner mission was the surface search. And believe it or not, the KC-97 crew finds it. All right, and they're going, hey, your Grozny's out here. It kind of came from, instead of coming this direction, off of Iceland and Greenland, it kind of came from this direction for some reason. And so it was kind of away from everything. Now, to all your listeners and all your viewers, you can actually go download the Strategic Air Command Operations during the Cuban crisis of 1962 is the name of the document. It's the top secret, now declassified document that talks about all of this. And it's freaking scary.
It was how close we were? It was.
Oh, yeah. We were inches from a nuclear war. Inches. All right. The B-52s were flying Chrome Dome missions, which they're carrying 4 nuclear weapons, and they're like up over the poles in the Aegean Sea. They're doing all kinds of things. And you have to remember, at this time period, we got 2 different kinds of tankers. We've got KC-97s, and the KC-135s are just coming online in 1962. The last one doesn't come on until like 1964, 65. So we're right in the middle of the KC-135 plus up. Well, of course, the B-52 Chrome Dome missions, you can't do with the KB-97. Can't do it. So the KC-135 fleet was seriously overworked, but did these missions, and they're offloading. These are the old A models, and they're offering a buttload of gas. They're offloading between 105 to 110,000 pounds of jet fuel, and the B-52 is probably on the boom for about 30 minutes, pumping 6,000 pounds a minute. I mean, it's a lot of gas. But you have to remember, the KC-135 can only hold about, on these missions, probably about 170, 172,000. So they're doing these refuelings really close to the base. And the Chrome Dome missions that were being refueled up over the Barents Sea north of Alaska, these were 24-hour missions. And the KC-135s were coming out of Eielson. And they would go up to a track they called Cold Coffee. Okay? We're in Alaska.
Yeah.
And it's October. And they would offload, Eric, this 105, 110,000 pounds. And then they would land. They would upload gas and reconstitute the airplane. And the same crew would go back up, several hours later and refuel it again. Okay? They flew 2 missions, So on one day, believe it or not, the 2nd or 4th of November was the largest Chrome Dome day. 74 missions. All of them taken between 105 to 110,000 pounds. So that's like 14 million pounds, somewhere around there. I mean, it's an incredible amount of gas.
Chewing through just all kinds of gas.
Yeah. And so the missions would go, some of the missions would go up the East Coast, Nova Scotia, come around Canada, and then would park over over northern Alaska, come down, refuel and cold coffee, go back up, refuel and cold coffee, and go home. Some of them would go out to the Aegean. They would get refueled going through the Straits of Gibraltar out of Torhone tankers. And the Torhone tankers would do most of that. Okay. And there was one other place, like out of England or something like that. But they're flying like 114 tanker sorties a day. It was a lot. And these are all KC-135s, and those KC-135s, there's only like half the fleet.
Right.
They bought 732 of them, and they only got like half of them. Okay. I mean, it's an incredible story. So go down, I think it's called Strategic Air Command's Operations during the Cuban crisis of 1962. If you just Google that, the document comes up. It's a PDF document that you can download off of some Cold War site. But when you go read that,
Yeah.
it's chilling.
One of the things I still love about the U-2 is it's a pilot's airplane.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
It's all cables and linkages, no fancy.
Yeah, and if you go online, see this air scoop here? This is the cooling for the cameras, was right there. That's the Q bay where they put the thing up inside there. And it's massive, massive. When you see the camera system that went inside this thing. But yeah, the U-2 missions and the F-8 missions. Matter of fact, Adlai Stevenson took the first Blue Moon pictures to the UN, and when he briefed everybody, what's going on in Cuba, and he's poking the Russian bear, and I can't remember the Russian guy's name.
Was it Khrushchev at the time?
Huh?
Nikita?
It's Khrushchev, but it was one of him and his UN envoy, and it's very well portrayed in the movie. And Adlai Stevenson brings out the pictures and just shocks the world because he's showing not only the large overhead pictures, but he's showing also the low level, okay? And you can see these guys pointing small arms up at the airplanes as they're going across the top. It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. But yeah, that's the closest we've come to a nuclear war. 1962. And then, of course, he does the blockade. And what a lot of people don't know, he does the blockade, but the Chrome Dome missions went way up. And it was kind of his way of saying, if you do this, there's going to be consequences.
Yeah.
Because you have to remember, an intercontinental ballistic missile in Cuba could reach, I think, to like Nebraska or Kansas. I mean, it was a long ways. The medium range, would cover most of the East Coast and certainly the South and Texas and everything. But the intercontinental ones, the Sandow, the S4, could go like to Kansas, It was a scary time.
It's quite the huffer cart.
And you see the two Buick V8 engines in here, man, side by side. This is what they used to start this thing. And this got the fan blades going, but because of the fuel, they had to have a chemical reaction to get the engines going. There's actually a chemical that would go into the engines to get them started. And you can go online and you can see all kinds of
Similar
pictures.
to like PTB for rocket engines?
Yeah. And they'd have to put this chemical in there that would set off the JP-8 that would start this thing up. There's still a lot of guys that are alive that flew this thing and absolutely freaking loved it. This is, of course, the engine. And you have to remember, from like here on back was like red hot.
Yep, I've seen the pictures. This whole thing just glowing.
Yeah, just
red.
glowing. Okay.
And what I love is that it's got off the bleed air is what feeds the afterburner.
Yeah. This was a major technological breakthrough to do this. Now, here's an interesting thing too about this, okay? You see this cover on the noses of these things. The ends of these things are needle sharp. And that's why they have these covers on them, okay? Because it will hurt you. I never got to refuel one of these. I got the Kadena, Eric, and they had left about 9 months before.
Oh no.
Yeah, they'd left about 9 months before.
Yeah, they did an amazing job in restoring this one.
Yeah, they have.
Well, this was the Frankenplane, so it was.
Yeah, this was the trainer.
The rear end, the aft end of one and the front end of another.
Yeah, the Frankenhabu. Like I said, every once in a while, Eric, they have an open cockpit day and you get to see the inside of all these things, Now, back a while ago, they didn't have it jacked up like this, and they would open both cockpits of this thing. It was amazing to see the inside. And you have to remember, it's electromechanical avionics in it. I mean, this is old technology in the 60s.
Yeah, Museum of Flight in Seattle, they have the forward section you can sit in the in the cockpit.
Yeah. Yeah, but think about this. You can shoot a 30-06 bullet and this thing could take a picture of it and accelerate away from it. Isn't that crazy? I never got to refuel these either. These were just coming online as I left in 2007.
And the funny thing is about it, the thing that really determined its endurance was how much liquid nitrogen they could carry.
Yeah, you're right. But man, this thing I've seen pictures from the SR-71, and the dimples on the golf ball is really true. See, what is this? Oh, so they would put some of their reconnaissance stuff in these bays here. Yeah, this is the one airplane that's freaking built for speed, man. Built for speed. So, the gentleman that this suit was made for happened to be a good friend of mine.
Oh.
Okay. Gil Bertelson, all right? Do they have a picture of Gil? No, that's not Gil. Anyway, Gil Bertelson had been an F-111 driver and, filled out a
dream sheet
that he wanted to be an SR-71 guy. And most of the guys that flew this all came from fighter backgrounds. And that is his suit. He used to live in Provo, Utah, about 3 streets over from my mom and dad. And so we went to the same church building. We weren't in the same LDS ward, but we went to the same church building, okay? And obviously when he and I got together, we became kind of inactive in church because he and I would just sit and talk, okay? But this is his SR-71 suit and his helmet and everything, which I was quite surprised that he still had them. But he said that—
Custom fit?
He said they're custom fit, they don't fit anybody else but you. And so they let him have it. And he kept it like in his attic for I don't know how long. Unfortunately, Gil's no longer with us. He got some kind of infection and it went septic. And they couldn't get the antibiotics in him fast enough, and it killed him.
Yeah, we always think that it would be a stand-up fight, but it's normally—
Yeah, I know. Here's a guy that flew F-111s, SR-71s, went back to F-111s, and flew all these missions and everything like that, and catches some weird infection that goes septic, and he dies from it. This airplane is truly the beast. I don't care what people say internationally. The F-22 is, without a doubt, the best air-to-air fighter and also attack airplane in the world. The F-35, I realize, is coming online, and yes, it has a lot of really cool things like the electro-optical systems and everything like that. But everything I'm told is, this is the beast. Funny story. There was a bunch of Iranian F-4s that were humiliating, intercepting, and toying with one of our drones that was out over the Northern Arabian Gulf. And they were messing with it, and of course the sensor ball is recording all of it. They're armed and everything. And so they had a bunch of these stationed at Al Dhafra, and they launched 2 of them. From the 90th Fighter Squadron, the Diceman up in Alaska at Elmendorf. Well, the F-22 cannot be seen by the Iranian air defense system. And so these 2 guys come up literally impervious and with impunity, come up behind the F4s, take all kinds of video through the HUDs and everything of them and everything. All right. And finally, the one pilot, the lead, goes, I think you guys should leave now, and comes up next to the F4s. And the F4s just go, whoop, we're out of here. All right.
It's unfortunate that we sold them the F4s, the F-14s, the P-3s, and that damn 747 tanker.
Yeah, I know. I know that. Let me finish this story real quick. Anyway, I was at the Reno Air Races with my uncle a couple years back. And he told me, he says, Mark, you gotta go talk to that guy right there. All right. And I walk up to him, and in the 90th Fighter Squadron, they wear dice, because they're called the Dice Men. And they have these dice from Vegas, I can't remember which casino, hanging from their flight suit, okay? And I said to him, hey, my uncle told me to come over and talk to you. Are you the humiliator of the Iranian F4s? He goes, yeah, matter of fact, I am. And told me the story. It was so cool.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Now, you mentioned Iranians. On my Lessons from the Cockpit podcast, I interviewed and just recently talked to General Fred Izadseta. He goes by Colonel Fred now. General Izadseta was an F-4 pilot in the Iranian Air Force during the Iran-Iraq thing. General Izadseta has the distinction of planning and flying in one of the longest F-4 bombing missions ever. They took off from Hamadan in Iran, flew at 300 feet at 350 knots behind the 747 tanker through the mountains of southeast Turkey, came around, went through Syria down to the H3 complex and tore it up. Okay, they loaded all the airplanes to the gills with bombs and F-4Es with guns and everything, okay? And basically wiped out the airfield that was down there and then flew back, all right? At 300 feet, 350 knots through the mountains. It's an amazing story. And he's written a book too now. His real name is Fredun Izadseta. He just goes by Fred.
Fred's so much easier.
Yeah. And believe it or not, he's like 82, 83 years old, Eric, and lives in California, San Juan Capistrano. He's a contractor, all right? And every so often, all of his Iranian buddies get together and have this big Iranian meal at his place, all right? The 747 tanker pilot that was flying that mission lives in Ottawa now, or Toronto, and will come and join them. But Colonel Fred was actually flying in the 747 tanker in the cockpit and was actually watching their refueling through the back, out the sighting window, okay? At 300 feet, at 350 knots, through the mountains of southeast Turkey, okay? This is the same mountain range that Mount Ararat is in, okay? And we used to fly over these things, the Northern Watch missions. And I mean, just freaking incredible, you know? But
that's definitely Wile E. Coyote, on the Acme rocket.
Absolutely, okay? But if you go and look up Iranian Air Force airstrike on Iraqi H3 complex, this whole story comes up, all right? He's written a book too, and God, the name escapes me. But you can get it on Amazon, all right? Something of Eagles. I'll have to send it to you, all right? But it tells this whole story of like the Iran-Iraq war and him flying and all this kind of, it's a really, really good book. And it's translated into English, okay? I got to take mine down. Colonel Fred has invited me several times. Hey, come down to one of our dinners, man. I'd love to introduce you to all these guys.
That would be an interesting crowd to.
Oh yeah.
I would say get it liquored up, but they most likely wouldn't have let them with you.
Yeah, and like I said, Colonel Fred has some amazing stories to tell. All right. But
before you got here this morning, I used my extension pole and gimbal camera and stuff and got all around
Yeah.
the sea. It'll turn out pretty spiffy on
Did it? Yeah, I should be taking pictures from my. Anyway, we'll figure that out later. Now, I have the great honor of having flown in F-15s 3 times. As a matter of fact, my very last ride in the F-15 is with a guy by the name of Cruiser.
Yeah, you've told me that story before. And
Ken Wilsbach is now the Air Combat Command Commander, the 4-star. And we were flying as captains in the 90s, to give you an idea.
it's a great picture that you got
Yeah,
in front of it. And
yeah, with the tanker in front of me.
Flight suit on and your freaking
Yeah,
big smile.
yeah. You know, and here's the thing about this airplane. Remember this number, 104 to 0. 104 air confirmed aerial combat kills in this airplane, and it's never been beat in combat. 104 to 0. There is no airplane in the history of the planet that has that kind of record.
And we're still building them
Yeah.
for the
yeah.
Sauds now.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the new F-15EX is coming out with incredible capabilities. But let's go back here just real quick, okay? This is the Pratt & Whitney F-100 engine that is in the F-15 and originally in the F-16s. Now, they've got a new one called the 229s, which are really powerful, that you'll see on some of the F-16s. And how you tell is this pedal here is black instead of this color here, okay? But they took these pedals off of the F-15s, and you can see all the guts of them, all right? And the new F-15EX, though, has GE F-110s, the F-16 engine, okay? So it's got massive power, massive power. They're saying that a clean jet may be able to go like Mach 2.7, all right? A clean one, all right? And the EX,
Sounds like they need to repeat Streak Eagle.
yeah, it'd be fascinating to see how they do. The EX with the more powerful GE 110 engines, but it has the conformal fuel tanks of the E's, the Strike Eagles, but it has more hard points. So it can carry more weapons on the wing, okay, to include harm and things like that. The cockpit is all glass, touchscreen, like the F-35, okay? The Air Force Association convention, Boeing actually brought a mock-up of the cockpit that you could get in, and it was a simulator that you could fly certain types of missions, all right? The new F-18 Super Hornet cockpits are the same. And
I saw that in your Tailhook video.
yeah, my Tailhook video, I was sitting in the thing, all right? I also got to fly the F-35 cockpit too. And what was really cool was, in the F-35 cockpit, I told the guy, I was a KC-135 pilot. He says, hey, hop in. No, nobody's here. You can fly it for however long you want. And I said, okay, well, tell me, what's the fun scenario you got in here? He goes, oh, the raid. I said, what do you mean the raid? He goes, it's a raid of like eight flankers coming at you. Yeah. And I'm telling you, folks, the sensor system in the F-35 is freaking amazing, okay? Because not only is the radar looking at them, but the electro-optical cameras are also looking at it. And at like 40 miles, you could see the paint scheme of the flanker, what it was carrying, everything at like 40 miles, all right? It was amazing. So the airplane was loaded, obviously, all air-to-air. And it had the external pylons on it, for the AIM-9Xs. And so I shot like 4 of the airplanes down like really fast with the AMRAAM because they can't see me, all right? And then got the couple of others with the AIM-9X. Of course, we had to do some maneuvering. And the F-35 is not made for the air-to-air fight. It's for air-to-ground, all right? But it still can maneuver real well, all right? Not like the F-22 though, because the F-22 was made for maneuvering, and it literally turns on a dime, particularly with the vector thrust. Yeah. But I've got 3 rides in this thing. 8.2 Gs is what we pulled in one fight, okay?
Yeah, the most I got in the L-39 was 4.5, and do that repeatedly, it will wear you out.
It wears you out. And, you know, you have to remember, there's 2 of those engines in the back of the F-15. Here's its fuel burn, 8,000 pounds an hour at tactical speeds, 2,000 pounds a minute when it's an afterburner. It can burn through its fuel load in like 14, 15 minutes. Strike Eagle carries a lot more gas. But they had conformal fuel tanks for these things. And a matter of fact, Eric, when I was in Okinawa, we put them on the jet, all right? Particularly when they went to Korea and were on alert in Korea. And they had the conformal fuel tanks on, but they're a pain in the butt to maintain. And
it seemed like they'd almost have to be custom fit to each plane.
Yeah, the problem is whenever you had a fuel leak, you had to download both of them. You had to defuel them, download them, work on them, run a fuel system check on them. All right, put them back up, refuel them. It was just a pain to do that. And so they just went with 3 tanks instead of the conformals. But the alert jets were carrying 2 conformals and then 2 external tanks. On the alert birds when this was back in the 90s. So, oh, the engines are out of this one. So anyway, but yeah, this was the one. And what was it during the Syrian civil war? This airplane flew some of the long range strikes. You can put all kinds of weapons in this, JDAMs. And of course now, the small diameter bombs, the GBU-53 Stormbreakers, which are amazing weapons. It's the Block 2 version of the small diameter bomb. And they come forward to a rack and extremely accurate weapons, anyway. Then of course you got the Viper, which we had at Hill, you know. Man, I put a lot of gas in these. But here's the thing. You talk to any ground pounder. I don't care if it's Army, Marine, even Navy SEALs. They will tell you there's only one Air Force airplane we want around us, and it's that one. The Hog. We're getting rid of these, and I wish we had, because this airplane was built for the low and slow, close air support mission because of this freaking gun that you see here, okay? This was the gas diffuser, you know, that they had on it. Of course, it's got this on it now. But, you know, look at the size of the shells, all right? Look at the size of the bullet compared to my thumb. 30 round, depleted uranium. Yeah, I mean, just freaking incredible, you know? Just incredible. All right, that's pretty much for this gallery. You want to go?
Thanks for sticking around to the end. I appreciate all of your views, comments, likes, and for my returning subscribers, thank you so much. And I especially enjoy whenever somebody comments that they have a personal connection to the aircraft. Thanks again to Mark for this amazing tour, and to the Hill Aerospace Museum for maintaining this collection with such great care for future generations to enjoy.